Hello, my name's Janice Godrich and I'm here at PCS headquarters hosting our 5th Facebook Live event. I'm joined tonight by Mark Sawatka, our General Secretary, and really pleased that Fran Heathcote, one of our Vice Presidents and the DWP Group President, is also here with us tonight. And Fran, later on in the Facebook Live event, will be taking your questions on the DWP pay campaign and how DWP members can link into that. It's a very exciting time for the union at the moment. We approach our annual conference in about 12 days' time, and you'll know that our pay campaign is a key focus for us and one of our main priority at the moment. So first of all, Mark, can you give us an update on the pay campaign?
Yes, thanks Janice, and good evening to everybody. Can I start though first of all by saying that I really want to congratulate yourself. We've just announced the union's election results and you've been re-elected for the 17th time as national president, and it's a real tribute to the work that you've done. And I want to congratulate you publicly, and also to Fran, who's been a very, very important and high profile member of the executive as a vice president, also on Fran's election, and to all our NEC members who've been elected, and commiserations to those who've been unsuccessful. I'm delighted to give an update on the pay campaign because we're at a very, very important moment. Everybody will know that we're seeking to get justice on pay. For far too long, our members have had pay cuts in real terms now for over a decade. And this year, on the back of members voting in huge numbers, we have submitted a pay claim to the government for a 5% pay rise across the board, £1,200 minimum underpin and £10 an hour. And that is an attempt to try and address people's falling living standards and to start doing the work to make sure people are paid what they deserve for delivering essential public services. Now, having submitted the pay claim, one of the first things that happened that was quite disgraceful was the government ignored the pay claim for many weeks, and we had to mount a campaign just to get them to acknowledge the claim itself. We had a parliamentary event, members lobbied MPs in constituencies, and finally the government conceded to at least meeting us to discuss the pay claim. They then authorised a meeting with Cabinet Office officials, and we met them just before Easter, where we were able to present the claim on members' behalf and why we deserved above the rate of inflation this year, and why it had to be funded to ensure that departments didn't cut jobs and terms and conditions in order to give people pay rises. Now, what I have to sadly report is at that meeting we witnessed what I could only describe as a monumental betrayal of hard-working civil servants and public servants, our members, because the government last year led everyone to believe that there was no public sector pay cap anymore. And yet we were told at the meeting that the government has only budgeted for 1% pay rises for its own staff. Now that means if we don't challenge it, people who work for the government, our members, will be treated worse than any other part of the public sector. It's really an outrageous betrayal for people who work so hard. So we're stepping up our campaign now. And the real update to give members and reps tonight is that our conference is going to meet in just over a week's time. And the National Executive Committee is seeking agreement of conference that we now move to a statutory industrial action ballot to give us the ability in talks with the government to maximise the pressure to say to them, you must give funding to the civil service to allow people to get above the rate of inflation this year. And why this is such an important move for us is that we all know now we have to have over 50% of members voting for a ballot to be lawful. And we are saying to all our members, give us that mandate so that in those talks we can exert the maximum amount of pressure on the government. And if conference agrees to this, Janice, the important thing I wanted to stress at this point is that because of changes in the law, our intention wouldn't be, if members vote for industrial action, to call a strike. We'd have up to 6 months before we had to lawfully take industrial action. Our intention would be to look across the table and say, you cannot expect us to accept 1% this year. Our members have given us a mandate, so let's have a real negotiation to ensure above inflation pay rises can be delivered for everybody, like we've been able to achieve for people who work in the devolved administrations in Scotland, where we've negotiated above inflation pay rises. That's our message. Get behind the campaign. Let's get justice for everyone.
Thanks, Mark, and I'd urge all members to try and attend their mandating meetings that are held in advance of the conference and to put forward your views on the resolution that the Executive have tabled for discussion there. I'm going to start with some of our questions now, and the first one is from Mabeen, who works in DEXU. And his question is, we've been suffering since 2010, first with a 3-year pay freeze, and then subsequent years of pay being capped at 1%, where we have never got even a full 1%. Why has it taken the union so long to do anything meaningful about it?
Well, thanks very much for the question, and I'm sure that there are members who may well obviously think we haven't done anything about it because they've not seen pay rises in real terms. We have been trying for over 7 years really to challenge the government's pay restraint policy, and what we've been focusing on in that period is trying to get all unions in the public sector to stand together, because this policy affected all public sector workers. So we've been trying very hard to get joint action across all public sector workers to challenge the government's pay restraint policy. But of course, during this time, we've also had to try and stop job cuts, office closures, have a tax on our pensions and our redundancy terms. And we've been working flat out to defend members as best as we can, whilst trying to get other unions to join with us to challenge pay. But I think what's happened that is critically different now is that, of course, there's been a general election. We now have a minority government that is very weak, that is moving from one crisis to another. And as a result of that, the government has finally been forced to drop its 1% pay cap for other parts of the public sector. So why we're doing this now, Baveen, really is because we think that we have an opportunity to try to break a pay cap that other workers have already broken, that we have broken for some of our members in Scotland, and with a government that has no political mandate to treat us in the way they're trying to treat us. And that's why we think this is the best moment and the best opportunity we've had with a weak government to campaign in a way that forces them to treat you in a decent way.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Clearly, if we do proceed to ballot in order to put pressure on the employer to break the pay cap, the law has changed since we last had a national ballot, and one of the issues that we have to do is break what's called the 50% threshold. That's the we need 50% of people voting. We've had a question come in that asks us how are we going to break the 50% threshold this time?
Well, that's a great question, and of course the government introduced this threshold to try and stop anybody having the ability to take industrial action, and we will have to beat the threshold in order to put pressure on them. Now, we can be confident we can beat it, because in our consultative ballot last year we delivered the highest turnout in any union, in any ballot in the union's history, and we got to 48.8%. Now that is within a whisker of achieving the 50% threshold. And since we had that ballot result, we haven't just been sitting still. We've been working with reps and members the length and breadth of the country, analysing the result, doing the work to build a union that allows us to believe that we can beat the 50%. And what we're going to be doing now, if conference agrees, is we're going to be putting resources in, working with our reps on the ground, trying to convince everyone it is in your interest to vote, because if we beat the threshold, it doesn't mean we'll call a strike. It means we can go to the government and say, we now have a legal ability to call a strike, and therefore you must talk to us in a more serious way. And I think the thing I'd stress to members about our approach is this is different to anything we've done in the past in two ways. Firstly, we are guaranteeing, if conference agrees, that if members give us a mandate, we will not call any strikes before we report back to them on how the negotiations have ended, and consulting again on whether people then want to proceed with the action. That's an important thing to say. But the second important thing to say is this: the government don't believe we can beat 50%. It's why they've got the audacity to write to us and say you're still getting a 1%, even though others are getting more than that, and we promised you, or very strongly hinted, that you'd get more. It's because they actually believe that we can't do anything about it. So think how powerful a position we'll be in is if Janice, me and you and Fran and our negotiators can rock up to the Cabinet Office and say, do you know what, we've smashed the 50% threshold, members have said treat us fairly, or we're prepared to take action that is going to cause the government serious discomfort. That gives us a real powerful weapon, and we have to believe we can beat it, and I think our members will rise to that challenge because it's in their interest to do so. Okay,
thanks, Mark. We've had a question on that point about someone asking if there are any tips for getting more people involved, where there aren't perhaps reps at the moment in the workplace. How is the union going to approach getting that message across to members in those areas?
So I think the first thing to say is we've already started. Many of our reps will know we've already had pay briefings around the country. We are urging our branches to get members involved in the run-up to conference, to tell their reps who come and vote on their behalf what they think about the motion itself. We're doing an awful lot of work behind the scenes here. We've got new forms of communication. We've got new methods of communicating with our members, a new email system to contact people directly. We'll be having lots of activities around the country. But obviously at the moment, we have to get our conference to first of all agree that we need to move to a ballot. And we're in a stage at the moment of trying to get people to talk in their branches to come to conference and vote. We hope they'll vote for that motion, and then we will really hit the ground running. And I think that the tip that we would give people more than anything is if a member doesn't vote in this ballot, it is the equivalent of a no vote, because it means that we won't reach the threshold. And what we will urge more than anything here is it is your union, it is your pay, and it is your future. And all we're asking you to do is to put a cross in the box and to post it back if we get to a ballot. And I hope that the signal we give the Cabinet Office is this: people care, and they're going to show that they care about their futures and their family's income, and they will participate in the ballot. And remember, you know, even if a member votes no, we actually think it is important that that member participates in this ballot, because when we go to the Cabinet Office, we want to show them that well over half of our members have voted, and they've got to take us seriously.
We're getting quite a few questions, interesting questions coming in on the national pay campaign. So I'm going to take a couple more of those, and then we'll move to the DWP. Suzanne Grice has sent a question in. If we do go for strike action, will it be for at least 2 days, like other unions have done? Members have said that one-day strikes don't work, as management just make up for lost productivity through overtime. And a linked question there, Dan Herbs has asked, does Brexit strengthen our hand, given that civil servants will be doing most of the work on that?
These are great questions.
Yep.
And I'm really glad we're getting them, because the NEC has now for a while been listening to members and reps about action that we've taken in the past and how we can make sure it's more effective. Because of course the point of any action isn't to protest, it's to put enough pressure on the employer that they actually treat us in a more reasonable way. So the two things I'd say here is, first of all, to reiterate, if we ballot and members vote over 50%, we won't be calling action first of all. We will be going to the Cabinet Office to demand that in these talks they take us more seriously. And let's not underestimate, that is such a powerful message that I hope the Cabinet Office realise they've got to treat their staff in the same way as some of the employers in Scotland have treated civil servants who work for the devolved administration, and give them above inflation pay rises. But what we will be doing in this period that is different to before is, if members give us the mandate, we will be consulting with representatives throughout the country to ensure that the action that we take is not a one-day strike. It is actually designed to cause the most pressure on the government. And the consultation we will take place will look at what's the most effective forms of action. And what I would want to stress is that the NEC is not seeking a mandate to protest here. The NEC is seeking a mandate that the employer realises that we can cause them some serious issues. And therefore the question on Brexit is a really important one. I mean, let's look at what's happened in the last month. We've got Brexit preparations. We've got issues like universal credit, where we've been in the media this week about all the problems with universal credit. We know about the Home Office. We know about issues in the passports and the borders. We've got members working in places like the DVLA who do such an important job. And the message we have here is, what we want to do is for the government to not force us to take strikes, but to realise if they continue to treat you worse than anyone else, we are determined to make them sit up and take notice. So it's not about protesting, it is about really putting pressure on them.
Thanks, Mark. And just a final question in this section. It's something that you did touch on in your last answer, and I think many of our members will be asking a similar question. It's a question from Melanie McPherson in DWP. And a question is, how come the Scottish Government have found money to break the pay cap that the UK Government says is unaffordable?
Well, that's an excellent question, and let me say that we should recognise it's a good thing the Scottish Government have done that. But one of the issues that the Scottish Government had to take into account is the union was well organised, put a very persuasive case along with other public sector unions, and was able to persuade the government that actually what it had to prioritise was finding money to treat its hard-working staff in a decent way. And we've now got to persuade the UK Government to do the same thing. Because what I think we were able to successfully argue in Scotland is that our members working there, what they do every day, serve the people of Scotland. But we have other members in Scotland, of course, who work in DWP and HMRC and other government departments who are not being treated in that way because it's Westminster who decides their pay. So our message, I think, really is simple, that if you work in the public sector, in a museum or a gallery, a job centre, a tax office, the DVLA, wherever you work, what you deserve is to be able to go home to your family and tell them that at the end of the month, your living standards are not getting worse and you haven't got to worry that actually your living standards should improve. And that is great that we've achieved that for some of our members in Scotland. Now we've got to achieve it for everybody. And I think that what the Scottish Government have to recognise, I think, was the importance of their own staff. Well, what about Theresa May and Philip Hammond and all the rest of them recognising there'd be no Brexit preparations, there'd be no passports, there'd be no universal credit without our members working their socks off and yet being told we're going to treat you worse than anyone else. It's unfair, it's a betrayal, and we have the power and the ability to force them to think again if we stand together now and if we have a ballot, vote in massive numbers to say we'll do something about it. And let's hope they take notice.
Thanks, Mark, and also Melanie. I think what it does show is that when the UK government say it's unaffordable, it's actually not unaffordable. It's a matter of political choice, as the Scottish government have shown, and I think that's the point we want to sort of ram home consistently. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn to Fran Heathcote. Fran's one of our vice presidents and is also the group president of our members in the Department of Work and Pensions. And we've had quite a few questions at previous Facebook Lives about the pay in DWP, so we thought it'd be great if Fran could come along tonight and answer those, talk those through directly. So Fran, first question is around the employee deal. PCS members voted in favour of the employee deal in DWP, which lasts until 2020. So can you tell us why they should be involved in the 2018 pay campaign?
Yeah, thanks, Janice. And that's a good question to start off with, because I think we have to remember that the employee deal was all about the DWP getting pay parity for the first time with a number of other different government departments. So in other words, for all those who opted in, over the life of the deal, it would give them progression for the first time in a number of years and would bring us in line by 2020 with other government departments. The other side of that, though, is that since the deal was negotiated in 2016, inflation has gone up. And while some members did very well out of the employee deal, others did less well. And the deal today is probably worth less than it was worth in 2016. And for that reason, our aspiration shouldn't be to just get the employee deal. There's nothing in the paper around the employee deal that says that during the life of the deal, we can't aspire to more, to better. And that is why our members need to be part of this. Because what we actually want for our members is a cost of living increase alongside that progression and that pay parity. So if you talk to members in other government departments, they're not suddenly telling you that now the DWP's caught up, they're suddenly well paid. They're saying very much that they need to be part of this campaign, and so do DWP members. And when we go to the DWP and seek to review the employee deal in light with the rise of inflation, the barrier to that, we're always told, is the 1% cap. So the thing that prevents members in the DWP getting more than 1%, other than those that have benefited for the one-off deal, if you like, that was done, the employee deal, we absolutely have to play a key role in the pay campaign and be a big part of that national campaign. And that's really why I'm here tonight, to urge everybody in the DWP to play a part. Thanks,
Fran. Just some questions that I know if you're not in DWP, you may sort of wonder about some of the phrases that we're using. But it is clearly an important issue and why we've invited Fran along tonight. And we've had a question from Frank, who works in DWP. And Frank says, I opted out of the employee deal. Would any increased PCS gains under the national campaign be paid to me, or would I have to accept the employee deal contractual changes as well?
Absolutely not, Frank. And I mean, the whole point of the employee deal, it was a one-off deal, which was an increase above the 1% cap, which at the time, if you remember in 2016, was a fairly rigid cap. And we broke that, but in exchange for people being willing to amend their contracts to allow more flexibility over working hours. For those that opted out, that isn't now on the table. They have made their decision. We negotiated the opt-out. The DWP's starting position was they wanted everybody signed up to the employee deal. We knew that not all members would choose to do that, and so we negotiated the opt-out. We've never accepted that the increases that those members are being paid are acceptable. We've always argued for more and for a better increase and a better deal for those that opted out. But it cannot be the case that any contractual changes would be brought about as a result of being part of this campaign. So whether you opted out or whether you didn't, the key now is to be part of this campaign, because the key to getting better pay across the whole of the DWP is to be part of the national campaign.
Thanks, Fran. We'll take one more question at this moment, and please keep sending in any questions you want to ask Fran about the employee deal and the DWP pay situation. But it's a question from Sally, who works in DWP, and she asks, I'm getting a 5% pay rise this year under the employee deal. Why should I vote for industrial action to get a 5% rise?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is to say that the 5% is something you already banked. You've got that 5% as part of the arrangement that you've entered into with the employee deal. Our aspiration is to get more than that, because we believe members deserve more than that. As I say, it was very much about parity and not about cost of living. Cost of living's gone up, inflation's gone up, and our members deserve a proper, fully funded increase. And therefore, there's no reason at all, just because you're getting that money from the employee deal, that you shouldn't be part of this campaign, because we always want to try and get a better pay deal for everybody in the DWP. And, you know, whilst, as you say, some members have done very well out of it, and that's clearly a good increase that she's got. That's money in the bank. That's money that she's guaranteed. And the idea is to try and push the whole of the DWP's wages up to an acceptable level, and that will only be achieved through the national campaign.
Okay, thanks, Fran. I've got a question here. It's around the vote, indeed, getting the vote out in DWP, but it also links to, I think, some wider questions. So one of the questions we had in on the wider campaign was that reps are being asked to do lots of work. How can we be expected to speak to every member as well? But then Peter from DWP has asked how we're going to get the vote out in DWP. It's such a big department with so many workplaces. So maybe Fran, you'd like to give your comments on that, and then Mark maybe follow through with some of the wider points.
I mean, it's a big task, isn't it? I don't think anybody's shying away from that. We know that to get engaged with every member in the DWP is a massive ask. It's a massive ask of our reps, of our members, of our activists and of our advocates. And we'll only achieve that if we all work together. But actually, we had a pretty good practice run at this, and that was the ending of check-off, when the government decided we can no longer pay our union subs through our salary. And what we were able to do during that campaign is engage with a large number of members face-to-face in the workplace. That's not always easy, and I accept that some people are fixed into a headset or face-to-face with a customer, and it's not always easy to get access. That's why we need the biggest number of people possible to take part, to get involved, to talk to people about why it's important to vote. Even if at this stage you're not convinced that you would be prepared to take action, it's still really important that you cast your vote, because in casting your vote, that's our best chance of meeting the threshold. And so the more of us that are out there talking to people about why it's important, why it's relevant, and why people should pick the ballot paper up, put the cross in the box and send it off, the more chance we've got of being successful. So I accept that it is a big challenge, and you know, very familiar with the DWP and the disparity between some of the workplaces, but the answer is we're just going to have to do everything we can at every level to engage with every single member, and that's the way we'll achieve this.
Thanks, Fran. Just before I bring Mark in, can I ask people to share this event to make sure that we get this event out as widely as possible? And clearly, if you have got any particular question that hasn't been covered so far that you'd like to submit, get those questions in, and we'll try and deal with them. Mark.
Yeah, just two things, and I really want to echo the points that Fran made, because I think our key message is every single member of PCS would benefit from this campaign, because what we've got to remember is what's happened in the DWP was under a point when the government had a rigid 1% pay cap, And what we're seeking to do, and this is important to stress, is we want the Treasury to give funding to the civil service so that our members are not being asked to say, if you want more money, you have to give things up, or we have to accept job cuts, which is what the civil service approach is, which is, if you want pay rises, it's got to come out of existing money. And there are already reps in some departments where the employer is asking them to change terms and conditions to get a bit more money. Other parts of the public sector at the moment are having pay rises in the health service that are funded, and that's why our campaign is for more money, so that we can spread it across every member regardless of what's happened up until now. And on the question about the turnout, I mean, I agree with Fran, and let me say, I think we would want to pay tribute to the fact that any rep at the moment in PCS does an incredible job, because they're put under a lot of pressure, and we know it is really difficult. And of course, that's what the employer is depending on. They don't want us to meet this threshold, so they're going to do things to make it hard. And so what we have to say to ourselves, though, is the prize of getting this 50% and running this ballot is the ability to believe we can improve people's income and potentially their livelihoods. And that means we've got to try anything and everything. And I think the first thing is, an appeal to people tonight, is even if you're not a rep, you know, offer to help. We just want people to just do everything they can in the workplace to spread the message, to make sure that people vote, to make sure their details of PCS contact is up to date. And what we want to try and do is help. So apart from people on the ground doing whatever they can, I'd like to reassure people that with our new methods of communication, you know, in the last week we've issued emails, and we had 40,000 responses, I think, to the first email, and members gave us over 2,500 of them told us that they wanted to change their workplace. So we're trying to do this on a number of levels. Contact members direct through new communication system, asking our reps to do things in the workplace, but also if we've got a branch out there that needs help, go to your full-time office, your group office or your local office, and ask for some help, and we'll try and help in whichever way we can. Because if we do all of that and we pull this off as we believe we can, just think that the prize is an employer that won't be able to treat us in the way that they currently want to, and therefore let's not leave any stone unturned. But if you need help, ask for help and we'll do what we can.
Thanks, Mark. We've got some questions coming in now on around the national campaign, so we'll move to those. A question from Simon, who works for DFT, Department for Transport. He asks, what is the Cabinet Office or Treasury Ministers saying to the unions around funding?
So I think this is why I use the word monumental betrayal, because what they're saying to us is there is no funding, and they're actually, and this is astonishing, they're actually asking us to accept that our pay must come out of budgets they set at 2015. 2015, at the height of austerity, before the general election, was delivering cuts in every department, and they expect our pay to come out of those budgets. I mean, you cannot really, you have to sort of take a sharp intake of breath to think what they're trying to get away with. And they've literally written to us and said they've budgeted for 1%. It's almost like they don't understand there's been a general election. They don't understand that people were told last year by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I did it on Facebook Live if you remember, he told me to my face there'd be no 1% pay cap next year. And yet now they write to us and say that's all we've budgeted for. So if you think about it, if we leave that unchallenged, it would be such an outrage that they would think they could get away with so much more. And I'm really glad that they haven't got away with that in local government and health. You know, in health they've got 6.5% over 3 years funded, local government a minimum of 2%. As our question earlier said, in Scotland they found the political will to put funded pay rises above inflation. So they need to do that, and I believe that our members are going to say to them, take us seriously and hopefully vote in record numbers.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And Stephen Flynn has asked, can we use the national media to encourage members to use their vote?
Well, if conference agrees and to have this ballot, let me assure you that we will be doing everything we can to get the message out there that people need to vote. Now, we will be obviously putting our case in the media. We will be issuing press releases. I can tell you that we will be going to politicians in Parliament. We have got coming to our conference the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, John MacDonald, coming to speak. Chris Stevens, our parliamentary chair from the SNP, are coming to speak. And I believe that they will tell our conference that they fully support our union's aim to get above inflation pay rises for hard-working public sector workers. So we will leave no stone unturned. And I think we're going to get a huge amount of support, you know, because You know, when people see on the telly this week about what our members are having to put up with in universal credit and the DWP, when they see that our members were blamed for the Windrush scandal, a political disgrace of this government, they try to blame civil servants. You know, when I go to places like I was in last week, the DVLA, where our members are working flat out to issue driving licence and tax cars, you know, I think most people accept that to have an 11th year of a pay cut, that is totally unacceptable. So I think we get huge levels of support, and rest assured we will do everything we can to make it as public as we can.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Fran, as well as the DWP Group President role as a Vice President, you chair the union's organising committee, and we've had a question in from Kirsty in Preston that would be helpful if we can get some more information about. And her question is there any training or support available for new people wanting to get involved?
Kirsty, we're absolutely crying out for people just like you, because that's what this is all about. It's about finding people like Kirsty who's willing to put herself forward and get more involved, and we will bring support and training to anybody that's interested. Our task is to engage people, and clearly one way of doing that is by people like Kirsty that come forward. So absolutely, if you get in touch with your branch, with your regional office, we'll make sure that we provide support and training to you. Every branch in the union has currently been allocated a full-time officer of the union to help and support them during this campaign. So if there are people coming forward that want to get more involved, who are watching the video tonight and think, actually, I would like to be involved in that, just contact your branch or contact your office that's nearest to you, and we will make sure that we get you the support you need to get to play a role.
Okay, thanks, Fran. And there's been some good news recently, hasn't there, in DWP about opening hours. Do you want to let people know a bit more about that?
With the employee deal, obviously, the basis on which people could change their contracts was to allow more flexibility in our operating hours. And the indication was always that at some stage there would be a move to later opening in the evening and to Saturday working. I mean, it's been confirmed, certainly for the foreseeable future, there's no intended move to Saturday working. But on the extending hours into the evening, it was looking likely that some parts of the DWP were going to trial and roll out extended operating hours during the next rotation, which is the one that starts in October. It's now been confirmed that in the negotiations we've been involved in, the DWP are taking a much more cautious approach, because the basis for any extension of operating hours has to be some sort of demand or some sort of rationale in which our members have been asked to work those additional or those longer, not longer hours, but later hours. And they've now confirmed that whilst it will be trialled in three small parts of the DWP, three distinct areas: industrial injuries disablement benefit, disability living allowance, and access to work, in all other parts of the DWP, there won't be an extension of operating hours to 8 p.m. during the rest of this year, and certainly during the rest of the next rotation. So that is good news, and it means that the negotiations we've been involved in have been successful, because we've always said that in order to extend the hours, there needs to be a clear demonstrable demand, and that wasn't there or wasn't provided to us at this stage. So that's good news, and it's been well received, and I think people are, there's absolutely no point in anybody coming to work to twiddle their thumbs, and if you're sitting there doing nothing because there's nothing to do, then clearly at the time of the day when they do need you, when it's dead busy, that we need enough staff. What we don't have in the DWP are enough staff, and trying to stretch longer hours out of the existing number of staff was a challenge that clearly we're able to push the department back on, so that's good news.
Okay, thanks, Fran. I'm going to give Mark a couple more questions now about the national pay, and then perhaps move towards our ending third of the Facebook Live. We've had, there's two questions, Mark. I'll give you two questions and we can combine them. There's a question from Jenny from the Home Office, who says, what will PCS's position be if some employers offer good rises for some staff but not others? And an interesting question from Andrew about what else can be done to force a change to voting methods to allow electronic options, bringing ballots up to date.
Okay, well Jenny's question is really important, and in a way it explains why we want to have a mandate from members now for our central talks, because The purpose of our campaign is to get the Treasury to give us funding that every member benefits in across the board way, across the whole of our membership. But because the government likes pay to be negotiated in 130 different places and every department does something differently, they'll be trying to divide people up. And what we're saying at the moment is we do not want to be in detailed negotiations in departments when departments haven't got any extra money. We want negotiations with the Treasury to get that money that allow those pay talks to ensure everybody gets a pay rise. And the importance of stressing this, I put this way, is that if we don't get any extra money, what departments will do is say, if you want a pay rise, you've got to give something to get it. And that's where we will potentially get into some divide and rule stuff. If we have extra money, everyone can benefit. It's a unifying call, and that's why we want to ballot straight after conference, if conference agrees, to have this discussion with the Treasury immediately. The second question is a great question because, of course, what we want is more methods of voting because the more ways people can vote, the more likely they are to vote. And in our consultative ballot, people could vote by text, they could vote by phone, they could vote by email as well as post. The government in an industrial action ballot deliberately makes it postal only because they know that a lot of people have put their postal ballot paper on the mantelpiece, they'll think it's junk mail, they'll forget about it. And they are hoping on some sort of lethargy, really, that people forget to do it. And they know that that postal method means turnouts are generally low. So we've been campaigning for a while to say, actually, if you're interested in democracy, people should be able to vote at work. They should be able to vote not just by post, but by internet and by telephone and by text. Because if they really wanted people to vote, they'd make it easier. So the way they do it tells us what they're about. Now, I'm happy to report that obviously we know that opposition parties, so the Labour Party, for example, Jeremy Corbyn has told us personally, hasn't he, that if he gets into government, they will scrap all of these laws, and the first thing they'll do is make it easier for people to vote. And I want us to keep campaigning so that people have a right to vote. But that's not going to happen in the next 6 weeks when, if we ballot, we'll be balloting in June. And so, you know, all I can say at the moment is we will hopefully still chase people up and still send reminders, and we will use all sorts of technology, but the only way a member can vote is still, unfortunately, by post. And so please make sure you do that. And if you get a communication from PCS in that period, don't put it to one side. We'd urge you to open it. And remember, the simple act of putting an X in a yes box could be the difference between you, whether you get above the rate of inflation or you're condemned to another year of pay cuts. So make sure you post your vote.
Okay, thanks, Mark. The very first Facebook Live event we hosted a few months ago was around the Civil Service Compensation Scheme, which was a big issue and still is for thousands of members. So I'm going to move into the final session of our Facebook Live event in asking Mark if he's able to give us an update on the negotiations on the Civil Service Compensation Scheme. And we've had a particular question come in from Graham, who's asking about protection for the age group 50 to 55 within the alternative proposals put forward, because they're hugely unfair to that specific age group, denying access to unreduced pensions.
So they're great questions. They say, I'm glad they've come up, and I'm really glad the compensation scheme's come up, because we're talking about pay and fighting for justice. So it's a really good segue, because actually what the compensation scheme shows is the union and its members at its best. Because we remember the government committed an outrageous act in 2016 when they cut members' terms, including, as a second question points out, denying early access to pension and making cuts of up to 30%. For people who really needed a decent compensation scheme, because the government was cutting jobs left, right and centre. And yet, because 96% of members voted in a ballot to not accept it, we went to the High Court and we overturned the government. And here we are now, almost a year after that judgment. We still have the 2010 terms. We're still having members getting extra money to put right the wrong that was done to them. And we're still, crucially, in negotiations, trying to defend the best terms that we can. And this question's come up today. It's funny enough, Janice, because earlier on we were at the Treasury having negotiations on the compensation scheme. And what I can say is that, rest assured, we are still at the table with the Cabinet Office negotiating the best safeguards that we can for members. We've already made it clear that we don't believe there's any case to change the 2010 terms that we run back in court. the Cabinet Office and the government are still intent to try to impose worse terms and conditions. But it's good that we're still at the table talking. We are raising the question of early access to pensions. We are raising the fact that people whose office closes, have no job to go to, need a decent compensation scheme. And all our members should have the right to expect that what they have a contractual entitlement to will not be taken off them when they need it most. So we'll keep talking, we'll keep negotiating. We're going to our conference in a week's time. The compensation scheme will be one of the things that we debate. But I think our commitment is that when the NEC has got to a stage where it thinks those negotiations are reaching an end point, we will come out to our members and our reps and explain exactly where we are and make sure that finally our members are consulted on what we do moving forward. And so, you know, rest assured we're at the table. And also, I'm at this point, if you're in a department where you are worried about your future at the moment and you're thinking, do I need to access the compensation scheme? If you're worried about that, the only terms at the moment the employer can offer are the ones we won in court reinstating the 2010 terms. Remember that, because it's an important security, and if they change, we will come out and we will tell you where those negotiations take us.
Thanks, Mark. We're coming towards the end of our time for this Facebook Live event. I'm just going to take the opportunity to ask Fran and Mark a similar question. Our union's conferences take place in just over a week's time. It's the sort of parliament of our union. It's where our policies are decided democratically over the next 12 months. We have conferences, first of all, for our departmental groups, and Fran will be chairing the DWP group conference. Fran, what are the main issues that are going to be debated at this conference?
Well, as is usual for the DWP, we've got an absolutely packed agenda, and not surprisingly, there are all sorts of issues on it. But I would say there are three main themes that are coming up again and again that people clearly want to have a union debate around. They are the conditions in universal credit and the way that's rolling out and the impact that's having. The office closure programme, which, as we know, has been we've had quite a big campaign against a lot of the closures with some success, but the next stage of that campaign will be the so-called transitional sites, and it's very hard to see how we can protect our members against all of those closures, so we need to have that debate. It's a dead important debate for this year's conference. And then I think the debate that's probably underpinning all of the other issues is staffing. And I said before, when I spoke before, that the one thing the DWP doesn't have enough of at the moment is staff, and where there are a number of areas of the department where they're ending fixed-term appointment contracts for staff at a time when we desperately need all the resource we can get. So clearly there's a cry coming from a number of branches across the DWP that we need adequate staffing in order to deliver a quality service. So that really underpins a number of the other themes of our conference this year.
Okay, thanks, Fran. And Mark, we've already obviously let people know that pay is going to be a key issue at the main national conference, which follows the group conferences. What are the other priority issues for that conference?
Well, our conference is a brilliant place, and I think we probably should say that, if you've never been to our conference, we'd urge people to think about coming in the future, because what you see, there used to be this myth, didn't there, about people go down to the seaside and they have a few days. I tell you what you see is the hardest working women and men there, standing up for their members and raising issues from local things that are of concern right up to the national stuff. And what we debate at our conference determines what we then take to the government and the Cabinet Office, whether, as Fran has said, it's in DWP or wider. So it's a brilliant place, and it really is needs to be seen, because I think it's our union at its best. And that's because of the people who come, the reps who come on members' behalf. I mean, the key issues, that there's so many, but I would say, obviously, we've talked about pay and the compensation scheme, but we're going to be talking about things that will affect us in the future. Digitalisation, for example, the government's estate strategy, its obsession with shutting places all over the place. We're going to be talking about equality issues, really important and at the heart of how we can get more and more people from across the spectrum involved in our union. We're going to be talking about pensions. We're going to be talking about wider issues. So, for example, Windrush. What a disgraceful way to treat people who've been deported from this country by a nasty government who then blame our hard-working staff in the Home Office. But we're also going to be talking about big picture issues like politics, like our political strategy, recognising that, you know, the next UK general election will be one of the most important we've ever had, and how can we as a union help play our part in ensuring we have a government that agrees with the policies this union has. And so we're going to talk about so much, you know, and on some days we'll talk about the environment, wider social policies. You know, it is an agenda that we don't make up, do we?
Yeah.
It reflects the things that our members want to discuss. And they can be, as I say, issues about conditions of service or big national or international issues. But I tell you what, it is the place for people to go and see, because it shows people who work hard, who care about their members, and actually, you know, they want a better society and a better workplace. And that's why I'm looking forward to it. I know you and Fran are looking forward to it as well. It'll be hard work, but it'll set us on a course to improve the lives of our members and their families in the year ahead.
Absolutely, and of course we also pay tribute to all the reps. That majority of them have to now use their own time to come to the conference, and I think that's a real testament to their loyalty and their commitment to PCS. Well, that brings us to the end of our Facebook Live event. I hope you found the answers to the questions that you've sent in useful. We've had some really good feedback that people value these events, and certainly the incoming NEC, I think we'll look forward to hosting more of them and taking those forward. So in conclusion, first of all, can I ask you to share the event and to make sure we get that out over our social media as much as possible. Just take the opportunity to thank our staff here who've organised and have been working throughout the event to make sure that the messages and the live status has continued, and to thank Richard, our signer, who's been at the back there doing his thing in terms of that. So thank you very much in terms of Richard for your support. So thank you very much. All those reps that are coming to conference, I'll see you at conference, and hopefully, unless we get positive signs from the government, if our conference votes to move to a ballot, then it will be all hands on the deck following that in terms of getting that vote out. And my final comments relate to a group of our members who are taking industrial action tomorrow, our conciliators, unbelievably at ACAS, the organisation that is there to try and help resolve conflict and resolve disputes. Those members, manager members there, have been forced to take action over important issues around threatened degrading of work and workloads. So you'll find on our website details of how you can show your support for that tomorrow. But we send a huge message of solidarity from this Facebook Live event from Mark and from Fran and myself to those members taking action tomorrow. Thank you.